Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this recording of a webinar. We're going to spend the next hour or so looking into some of the detail of how coaches and analysts can work effectively together. On the session this afternoon is myself. I'm Laura. I'm the FA's Performance Analysis Education Lead. We've got Aidy Boothroyd, England Under-21 Team Manager, James Ryder, England Under-21 Analyst, and Stuart Delaney, our FA Youth Coach Developer. Aidy, do you want to kick us off by just giving us a little bit of an overview of the coaching team and the technical team and the staff that you have around you whilst you're working with the Under-21s?
Today's going to be about three key things, really, Laura. People, planning and process, and performance. And within each of those, I hope we're going to cover, in terms of people, recruitment, getting the right people on the bus, the right environment. In terms of planning and process, the big picture, what it means to the system, pre-camp and training, and then performance, which is leading up to the game, match day itself, and then debriefing. So in terms of the people that I'll be mentioning, I'll be talking about our coaches, which is Tim Dittmar, Lee Carsley, Michael Johnson, and myself. I'll be talking about James Ryder, who's our analyst, Emily Angwin, that supports him as a data scientist in the background, and Claire Davidson, who's our sports psych for the Under-21s.
Brilliant. Cheers, Aidy. So that gives us a little bit of context to some of the names that we might get mentioned during the next hour or so. Just to kick us off, do you want to give us some of the attributes that you maybe look for in an analyst? What's the makeup of an ideal analyst for you?
I think the key thing is they've got to have a work ethic. It is a difficult job. There's an awful lot of work to be done, and work ethic has got to come first. In terms of good characters, honesty, we all get things wrong. I like it if we have an environment which we've got where people can get things wrong. We're expecting people to be stretched and to be pushed out of the comfort zones. I guess knowing yourself is really important. And knowing the sort of person that you are, knowing the sort of people that you work with, and we work quite hard on that in terms of being more than just work colleagues, and you go that extra mile for each other. I think probably the key thing is deciphering the information, so getting rid of the noise and picking out the key details that we need for each particular game, depending on the situation or phase that we're in.
And did you play, when James joined the organisation a few years ago, did you play a part in the recruitment of him? And I guess, do you see value in being involved in that process?
I think it's important that the coach is involved in it. I think it's important that they are involved in it, because at the end of the day, I get to see the whole of the team be part of the recruitment. Not all about me deciding who comes in, but more a joint effort between the MDT to talk about who is right for the role, not just in terms of skill set, but personalities.
And I guess, coach and analyst work so closely together that I guess your relationship and your ability to communicate effectively with each other, challenge each other, is pretty crucial to the success of the team.
Yeah, I mean, we have a couple of phrases in the 21s about leaving your stripes at the door, and we make sure we want to be the best we can be. And in order to do that, we've got to be honest with each other. We're going to get things wrong, me more than anybody else. And I think if the culture is that we want to work to be the best we can be, then there's going to be situations where we don't get everything right. In fact, we get quite a lot wrong. But it's how we recover from those things. And I think it takes a particular individual to be part of that and be willing to get there, put their hands up and say, yeah, you're right, I was wrong on that occasion. What do we do next?
No, great. And I think you've touched on it already, to be fair, Aidy, around working with the MDT. But how is that, like, kind of yours and James's relationship over a period of time kind of developed and evolved?
Initially when James came in, his first game was against Germany, if I remember rightly. So there you are. There's a little baptism of fire to get that and to make sure that he got that right. And I think it'd be fair to say at that stage that we probably knew more about the German team and what they did than what James did coming in from West Bromwich Albion as he did. But he picks things up quickly. He picked things up very, very quickly. I think part of that was, again, the environment, because of the people that are working in all the departments and the culture that we've got. But in terms of our personal relationship, I wanted to see, and I'm sure James will elaborate on this, I wanted to see how he how he looked at a game, because if we can't have an understanding of each other and what we see and what we look for, then it's going to take us more time. So we went to a couple of games together, and it was interesting to see some of the things that I was looking at compared to what James was looking at.
Do you want me to just elaborate on that a little bit further?
Yeah, please, James.
Yeah, I'd agree with Aidy that it was sort of a baptism of fire as soon as I came in. So straight within a week of joining, I think I was into a game against Germany, which was tough. And then straight into a Euros. We went to the 2017 Euros together, and it didn't really get any sort of less competitive at that point. If anything, it got more competitive, and it was chucked right in at the deep end, to be honest. So when we came off the back of that, we put a plan in place to get to know each other more personally, I think, because we knew each other professionally by the end of that and how we worked under pressure. But we definitely felt that working closely was also sort of getting to know each other. And I definitely say that I've worked in quite a few tech teams, and the ones that actually get to know each other as people are probably the best ones. So we set about doing that, and a couple of ways we did it was going to games together, as Aidy said, to go. And so as Aidy was going and scouting our players for the squad, I was sort of in tow, tagging along with him. And there was two things that came out of that. One was the car journeys. So hours spent in the car, as many scouts will know, driving up and down the country, sitting right next to him with nothing else to do other than talk. So you get to know each other quite well. And that's, we'd speak about families, we'd speak about different holidays we'd been on, we'd speak about loads of different topics, just getting to know the person. And as Aidy's touched on, once we got to the games, it was really interesting for me to see the way he looked at a game compared to the way that I looked at a game. So the one that sticks in my memory is a game we went to watch at Aston Villa, where Aidy said, so what are you looking at now? So I'd explain, like, I'm looking at the build-up play, how many times the goalkeeper's rolled it out to the centre-backs, how many times he's squeezed them up and gone long. I might be looking at when they create chances, how do they create chances? And I'm just sort of logging all that in my head, not coding anything. I'm just getting an idea of the way the team plays, because that's what I've spent years and years doing. And then Aidy's kind of gone, well, just have a look at that player there. And it was one of the left backs that was playing, and he'd had a poor touch at the start of the game. And Aidy went, just look at how he reacts now. Let's just see what sort of character he's got. And the next time he got it, he lost it again. And then the next time he got it, he just kept it really, really simple. And he kept it simple again. And he actually got booked for giving something away and then giving away a foul. And it was really interesting for me to just think, oh, he's looking at the personality of the player and those sort of characteristics. And he's looking at the person on the pitch. And he then sort of explained to me that if that was one of the games we were watching from an England 21s point of view, we might target that player now. We might try and play down that side of the pitch more. And it suddenly gave me an understanding of what he looks at, and his appreciation of the game compared to mine was very strategic, and his was very personal and looking at the players. So yeah, that was one way that we sort of got to know each other. And I think that was excellent for me now, knowing how the kind of information he wants, and also he knows what he can trust from me. The other way, which was a bit more probably strange, was before the last Euros, we went and did a flight simulator down at Heathrow. And
don't get in a plane with this guy.
Yeah. It was an unbelievable experience. It was really, really good. And basically we did it because we wanted to have a look at our technical team. So there was me, Lee, Tim, and Aidy. We'll look at how our technical team worked under pressure. So when you're trying to land a plane, a jumbo jet, there's quite a lot of pressure involved in that. And even though it's a simulator, it's really intense. Like, as the thing's counting down and saying like 50 meters till you hit the ground, 40 meters till you hit the ground, you're thinking this is scary. So we did that together, and we had like an instructor with us who spoke to us about sort of analyze the way we communicate with each other.
That's right.
And that was excellent. Like, at one point I had Lee Carsley was my co-pilot, and I was the pilot for this particular landing. And as we're coming into land, he taps me on the shoulder to pass on some information to me. And the instructor said, in 20 years of doing this, I've never seen a co-pilot tap a pilot on the shoulder during a landing. He was like, you can't do that. He's like, that's not a way to communicate. But it just showed the relationship that me and Lee had, that he felt comfortable to do that. But also when we get to a match day, say, and one of us is on the bench, one of us is in the stand, and we've got to communicate via the radio, he can't tap me on the shoulder. We've got to figure out a good way of communicating. So we've done a few different things to get to know each other. But I think definitely we're probably a better technical team off the back of these different relationships. And we spoke about time in the trenches. Me and Aidy had spoke about like getting to know each other under pressure. I think all those kind of things were really important to developing a good analyst coach relationship.
No, I completely agree. I mean, the years that I spent working with our national squads, just sitting down and watching the game with coaches was where I learned, so much about the game. And I guess for people that are maybe listening in, that it's really good that you emphasize that point of getting to know each other, getting a shared view and a shared vision of the game, because it's something that, I think is fundamental for the relationship being as successful as it can be. So I guess just James, just to build on that, I think when we look at the role of an analyst today, maybe compared to what it was even 3-4 years ago, I think it's massively evolving in terms of the skill set that the individual brings to the table and the impact that they can have on the game. Can you just give us a little bit of an overview in terms of what your key responsibilities are with the under-21s, but then maybe what some of the things are that you do that might sit outside of what people traditionally think of as an analyst skill set?
Yeah, okay. The first bit I was just going to kind of say was on your first point about how it's changed a little bit. And I think definitely when I first came into it, the analyst could have been a person, and probably still is in some places, that's just sort of kept in a dark broom cupboard and expected to tap their laptop and print out maybe some stats and give it to the coach. And while that does have a place, because some analysts don't interact that well with coaches, I guess, sometimes, and with players, I think if you are trying to maximize the role and get the most out of it, which it appears that most places are now, having that connection is really good. So that would involve, for me, which these are all things that I'm involved in now, is the conversations with the technical team around the philosophy that we've got and the way that we play. Any discussions about our opponent, then I'll be involved in. Discussions about team selection and squad selection, I'll be involved in. So yeah, all of those elements, I think, broaden what the analyst can do. And it also makes it easier for the coach, because instead of me bringing stuff that the coach might not like, if I know exactly how he works, I know exactly what he likes, then I'm going to be able to give him better information. Mm-hmm. So I think being a key member of the technical team and not separate to the technical team is really important to that. And I think that's definitely where it's going. In terms of what my key roles are, you've obviously got the analysis sort of basics, which is the key thing that if you don't do these, you can't really do the rest of your job. So between myself and Emily, the assistant sort of analyst with the 21s, we'll obviously film and capture all games, all training sessions, which is important because that's the resource that you need to be able to go back on. We'll provide opposition sort of preparation. So I won't delve into that too much now, but we'll look at the opponent. That could be from looking what the coach does in terms of strategies, or looking at the individual members of the opposition team. We'll also review our own team. So we have quite a big part to play, both data and subjectively, in reviewing our own team performance. And then I don't really know, because this has been sort of part of my role for quite a few years now. I don't know if it's different to other analysts, but being involved in then the game plan development. So instead of just looking at the opponent and here you go, this is the opponent, I'm going to give it to my coach. It's here's the opponent, this is what it could mean to us. And because I know the way that you want to work, Aidy, and because I know the way Lee wants to work and Tim, I can help to suggest things that fit in with our philosophy. So actually coming up with a plan to try and win games. So that's definitely a part that's evolved in the role, I think, from when I first started. Now that might be because of me. Maybe when I first started, I didn't have the confidence to do that. I definitely remember a couple of coaches saying, well, we want this from you now. So definitely give that. And Aidy definitely encourages that. It doesn't mean that I have the final say on anything. That's definitely not the case. But it does mean I can put an opinion forward about what we could do. Taking in all the different factors. Another part which then is probably slightly different, and I don't know how many other analysts will do this at the moment, but I think different personalities that the analysts might have compared to the coaches fits in well with different tasks. So, for example, most analysts, as Aidy pointed out earlier, tend to be quite sort of logical thinkers and sort of analytical thinkers. So I tend to get quite involved in the planning process, in terms of, we're going to talk later about the way we plan our whole campaign out rather than just sort of camp to camp. But I'll get involved in the planning of that and the planning of projects that we have to do with like penalty shootouts and stuff like that. Tend to try and lend those logical thinking attributes to those problems. So again, I don't know exactly how much other analysts will have an involvement in that, but I think it's definitely a skill set we we possess that we can help coaches with.
No, I definitely agree. I know, like Aidy mentioned the personality profiling a little bit earlier, and yeah, there's definitely a corner of that. We would definitely fit in the blue corner quite a lot, and therefore because of being, yeah, like you say, logical, organised, think things through in a particular sequence, it does really lend itself to other tasks that might traditionally fall outside of what you think an analyst might do.
Yeah, I think Reese, who's obviously our boss in the analysis department, refers to the analyst as being like a caddy to the coach, who would be the golfer. And I think we try and look at it in that way, that I'm not trying to give him the same opinion that he already knows. I'm trying to provide him with a different lens and sort of suggest different things without treading on any toes. I
think that's really important. The way that we work is that everybody is expected to stretch themselves, and James might not be comfortable initially in coming in and giving out his view of the game and how it should be, but that's exactly what we want, because it's really important that everybody that walks into that environment that understands that you're here to do a job, but we accept you're going to get it wrong, but we want you to stretch yourself and we want you to speak up, because the days of the analyst, as you mentioned, Laura, is just sat in a corner typing away are over. They have become pivotal in what we do.
No, I think it kind of lead into my next question there, Aidy, around the environment you create for your staff to try and then obviously have a positive effect on the players to try and bring success. I know that James has kind of alluded to some of the experiences he's had around how you kind of allow him to do his work to try and be successful, but how else do you use to utilize the MDT, and how do you create the environment to try and allow them to have a voice and to allow them to have the aligned kind of messages, but to try and bring success to the team?
Well, I think Stuart, that if you've got a good environment, the thing that leads to a good environment is getting good people in terms of character, good people in terms of skill set, and good people in terms of loyalty to each other, to want to be the best that they can be. And we've certainly got that. Sometimes it's even a case of getting the right people on the bus, but then having to upskill them to get to the right seats, and that includes me, stretching people and expecting to be stretched myself. But I think you've got to be able to, even in a pressured environment, which we've got in terms of the time we've got and the games that we've got, I think you've got to be in a position where, if you want people to be better, if you want them to be to improve, then they've got a challenger that all of us want to be successful, and we're not going to be successful if we're nodding our heads at each other all the time. There's got to be some constructive conflict, because that's part of what we're doing, and we've got to accept that we're going to get things wrong because of the time that we have compared to what they would in a pro club or in the pro game environment, or academies for that matter. But we have a bit of an acronym which is around winning, which is WIN, what's important now. So whatever happens, we always look to that. How do we move on to the next step? But the environment is absolutely huge, because I think if you haven't got that right, then you're forever playing catch up, because you don't know your people. You're not aligned to what the roles and responsibilities are. Above all else, I think the blue people, the logical people, they want clarity, and they want to know what the role is, and they want to know what the responsibilities are. If we all know that from each other, then it makes us a slicker. If people are accountable, it makes for a better environment.
No, thanks, Aidy. I mean, that's brilliant. I think if we just move on now to delve in a little bit more behind some of the planning and the processes. And obviously, you guys work on a 2-year cycle, a 2-year program with the European Championship finals every 2 years. Hopefully you will have those again in next summer 2021, am I right?
Yeah, that's right.
James, do you want to just give us an overview in terms of, I guess, the planning process with a view to like the 2-year process that you've alluded to, but then also what the impact that 2-year plan has on your camp by camp process?
Yeah, I don't know. Aidy was just, we were talking before about whether Aidy mentions sort of what our overall sort of goals are in the 21s as well, just to sort of tee this bit up.
Yeah, there's my job's about two things really. One is the developing of people, and that's getting players into the first team for the seniors for Gareth, for supporting and providing him, being the bridge from the development teams to bring the players through. Sometimes before they're ready for that physically, perhaps, but we're pushing them through and getting our players into the 21s. It's about growing the staff, as I've talked about already, about putting them in positions where they're expected to be stretched and they're expected to deliver. But probably the other thing is, strangely, is winning. We're expected to win because we're England and we're England under 21s. So in order to was there to produce players for the senior team, people to grow within the staff and hopefully push them onto the first team so that they could get those experiences and winning. And that's a paradox in itself, because if you're getting rid of your best players, you're weakening your team. But that is, to me, what development is all about. Is if we can win and we can provide players, then that's our key role. Yeah.
So with that being like the big picture of where we're going, we've also, especially this sort of campaign, tried to do a campaign plan as well, which feeds into every single camp that we have. But we've called it our 2-year plan because we're on a 2-year cycle. And basically what we did was, after our last Euros, we got everything on the table that we could potentially work on, every element of the game that we thought might be potentially an area we want to be good at by the time we get to the Euros. And then it was Aidy really who spoke about the 80-20 rule, of basically looking at all those elements and deciding what the most important 20% was. And then once we'd figured out what the most important 20% that we think will help win us the Euros, we then sort of worked backwards at how we could fit them in the next 2 years. I think because what we'd realised was the time constraints we have when we get players for 10 days, two of them might be games, 2 of them might be travel days. There's not a lot of time to work on anything.
So we're actually practicing and working on the job in the games, really.
Yeah, they are practice sessions almost, the games. So we realised that we need to be quite focused on what we try and fit in, instead of going into a camp and going, right, we're going to work on build the attack, create the attack, finish the attack, and we're going to work on high press, mid block, low block, and counter. Like you literally can't fit all those things in, and if you did, you'd just be brushing the surface of them. You wouldn't actually get into any details. So yeah, we looked at the 20% that were the most important, and then we tried to fit them into our sort of 2-year block. And I'll probably go on to talk a little bit more in a minute about sort of what goes into that. But yeah, that's pretty much how we look to structure the 2 years.
So again, yeah, I guess lead you on there more specifically on a camp by camp basis. What does that look like? And I guess, you've already alluded to the fact that the constraints of the time that you have working with the players is obviously very limited because of the international window. So the time you have together to maximise that is critical, which I guess brings maybe James you to the forefront, because there's only so much time you can spend on the pitch. So the work that you might do in and around that probably becomes even more crucial in your environment. So I guess, can you just give us an oversight of maybe some of the key factors when you're considering planning, and then particularly, James, your role around the analysis within that?
Yeah. So yeah, starting with the first part, when we're trying to prepare for a camp, I've got a list of there's loads of different factors that we sort of look at. The 2-year plan being probably the biggest one. So when I mentioned it a second ago, there's more detail that goes into it in terms of, we looked at every camp that we've got, who our opponents are, because we know that pretty much for the 2 years, other than maybe the friendlies right close to the tournament. We look at then the type of opponent. So there's no point in us saying, right, we really, really, really want to work on high pressing in this next camp, and then we play against 2 teams that don't play out from the back. Well, you can't high press, so that's almost like a waste of a plan. So we'll take into account just a brief look at what all of our opponents do right at the start of the 2-year campaign, slot those things in. We'll look about what we want to try and work on. We'll look at the travel times involved. So if we've got 2 away games on one particular camp, that means probably about 4 or 5 bus journeys, 2 flights. It means taking equipment to and from different training grounds and things like that. So you actually reduce the amount of time you've got from being quite small to being ridiculously small. So you can't fit things in. So we'll basically say for that camp, that might involve more off the grass stuff for that camp. So I know that my meetings have got to be more important for that camp. We'll also take into account the heat. So there's no point in us going, again, I'll use the high pressing as an example. If you wanted to work on high pressing and we're in a country that's ridiculously hot, that might not be the time to practice that because the players won't be as focused. So all those things go into the plan. That's on the big scale again. So narrowing that down smaller, we review the campaign after each camp. So that's data wise, looking back at our team metrics and looking at just subjectively. So the coaches will go away and watch the games back and things like that. So before we plan for a specific camp, we might say, well, actually, we've done X, Y, and Z really well so far, so we don't need to touch on that as much. So it's almost that constant review and feedback process. Another element that goes into camp preparation would be squad selection. So the analysts and the coaches have both got a role to play in that. So as analysts, we'll be looking at we collect all of our own sort of data within the organisation on our players when they're at their clubs. So we'll be looking at that and seeing how they're doing form-wise and stuff. Also, we'll be watching things through Huddle to see how the lads are getting on. At the same time, then Aidy and Lee and Tim and everyone are out watching games. So they're going and watching all the players. And I'm sure Aidy will talk about this in a bit, but we tend to meet up every Monday and discuss these kind of things. So it's like a constant feedback, constant review of our players. Now, depending on who we've got coming into camp, might depend on what we can work on. So that obviously can't be planned too far in advance because you need to know who's in form, things like that. So that forms a part. And then the final part that probably affects what we do on camp will be the opposition analysis. So the more in-depth now look at what they do and what their strengths and weaknesses are. So all of those things in one big melting pot then come to how we prepare training. And it definitely affects what we're going to show in meetings. So I'll have already prepared if there's a lot of stuff around, I don't know, our central midfielders trying to receive the ball past their forward line, then I can have clips and best practice things and everything already ready for that. And we might be able to use that in some of the meetings. So that's probably how it fits in on a camp-to-camp basis with my analysis. I don't know if I missed anything off there. I seem like I was talking for ages.
No, you've done a great job.
No, I think that, you've just alluded to loads of really good kind of rich stuff there, James, around the amount of time you review and plan around things. But I suppose the time between each game or each kind of tournament, there's a vast amount of kind of knowledge and experience and kind of thoughts gathered between the group. I suppose the question would be, how do you kind of simplify all the complexity of what all these kind of experiences are kind of bringing up to the party, and how can you decide which ones kind of stay and which ones kind of are not quite ready to be introduced to the group, because we've got to try and really kind of simplify it for the players. How do you come about kind of doing that within your kind of MDT meetings?
I think that we work, because we work in every Mondays, and we've got the concept that we might have the players for 10 days, but actually let's think about it logically. We could have them for up to 65 days, 70 days, depending on what tournament we might be in. So if that's the case, we've got to look at the big picture, but then the detail comes. So in terms of the Monday morning meetings, we're actually watching those players playing for their clubs, sometimes live. Then we'll go and watch some of the other players. There might be an emerging talent that's come through that Kate from Insights mentions, and we have a little look and take that further. But we are extremely well planned. I mean, we look great. It's just a shame we have to play somebody. We're a bit like the groundsman that cuts the grass all the time and won't let anybody on it. We've got a brilliant plan, but there is an opponent there. And as I think Mike Tyson or Joe Louis said, that it's great having a plan till you get punched in the face. We've got to be really good at adapting. We've got to be really good at being flexible. So we'll have situations where we've picked a squad. We know what we've got, and then I might get a phone call from Gareth to say, so-and-so's injured. We're thinking about this player. What do you think? And as always, of course, that's what we're here for. We're here for you, whatever you need. So they are always priority. And then we've got to be great at adapting, improvising, and overcoming, because that is a key component of our job. If you're not flexible and you want all your ducks in a row, then you're going to have a problem with us, because all kinds of different things that we've talked about. When we actually get on camp, all the players arrive, as James has alluded to, off to go and have the medicals, but they're all at clubs that have a different way of playing the game. They're all at clubs that have a different physical methodology and philosophy, and then they come to England, and we're asking them to do something different. So we've got our England way. We know why we want to play, what we want to do, what the objectives might be for that particular camp. In terms of the meeting content and how we put it through to the players, I always think that less is more, but that's for the players. For us, we cover every single detail, and rather than sit in a room for hours and hours on end, we're more machine gun fire and more creative. So Lee Carsley might be waiting up at Starbucks and wait for a player to come through with the tactics board and say, "Come and have a look at this." The welcome meeting that they'll do will go over what we've done, where we want to get to, and where we are right now, and what that means to us, regardless of the players we've got or not got, because we've got I think we've used 33 players in 6 games so far. So that tells you the spread, really. Every day there's a meeting, but it's 15 minutes long. This is how we're going to defend. This is how we're going to defend in this particular game against this particular opponent. These are the individuals we think we can isolate. So we'll do that information. We'll then give them that information. We'll then go out onto the training pitch. Training will be filmed. We'll have our hot debrief afterwards, which is all the coaches, Claire and James, get together with the coaches, and we'll talk about how our method was. Did we get what we wanted to achieve out of it? How was my session? Does it need more command and Q&A? We would review that in a hot debrief straight after, which might only be 5 or 10 minutes. The coaches will then tend to go off with James and watch the game. Watch the training, and then the cycle begins again. Then what we did in training, useful. Okay, well, you might want to get hold of Max Aarons and talk to him about his 1v1 defending or whatever it is in that particular instance. So it's a lot of work for little bite-sized chunks of information all around, all the time. Trying to tell them what it is that we're looking to do, why we're looking to do it, how we're going to do it, and what it is that we're going to do. So there's a lot of information flying around, but we try and keep it as simple as possible, because that's the way I like it. I'm a noddy and big ears sort of a guy.
I suppose it's being really clear about what you're trying to achieve in each camp, and then how best you're going to try and put that together.
Yeah, I think the themes that we sort of, all those different things that we said that come together to make a camp theme, seem to, everything tries to fit that direction. There'd be no point in us suddenly working on something completely different to what we've just spoken about, the theme being. Again, we spoke earlier about, actually, the way we deliver a lot of this to the players is quite informal. And like Aidy said, little bite-sized noddy and big ears bits. But actually, behind the scenes, it's really structured, the way we're going about this to try and get to these points. But I suppose ultimately, it's not got to work for me. It's not got to work for Aidy. It's got to work for the players. So it's whatever we can give them. And they're used to being this fast-paced, little bits of information all the time kind of generation, rather than let's sit down and have a 40-minute keynote speech.
Yeah.
So it's however it fits with them to get the message across ultimately.
No, brilliant.
So just to jump in there, that's one of the, I think the key parts. We're now in a world where we're content rich. There's so much information available, and you guys will know that. But you, as the coaching team or the MDT, are the filters of that information. You've got to take all that on board, make sense of it, understand how it works for you and helps you, and then filter that for the players. And like you say, James, we're now working with players that are from a generation where lots of bite-sized chunks of information is available all the time. So how you guys filter it, and then how you guys package that up informally or formally for them to interact, engage with is pretty critical. But I think I love the word you said there, James, in terms of it's got to meet the needs of the players. They're the important ones, because they're the ones that cross that white line and go on the football pitch and play. So so I'm really glad that you brought that to the table.
No, brilliant. And I think just touching upon the bit around trying to develop the individuals, try moving into the first team, I'm just trying to really ask a question on, through your experience around playing against like other national team squads, what kind of tech kind of qualities do they have depth in, which maybe we might be lacking in our national game? If so, how can we encourage to bring these within our game, like moving forwards?
Well, I think we've got to a place now where we're actually as good, if not better, than anybody else in the world, and that's in terms of our techniques, and that's not being big-headed about it, because that's certainly not the case. But we've got to a point now where we used to talk about our players not being technically gifted like the teams that we're playing against. But I think now, because of the work that's been done in the academies, in terms of they've got them young, they're working with them. We get that, we reap the benefits of that as an England team. So technically, we're, to answer your question, as good as anybody, if not better. I've seen that with my own eyes. I think from our point of view, what we've done that has helped the players to test those technical skills and test those tactical skills is either games program that is very, very difficult against global opposition. So the 1997 group that won the World Cup, the year before that, we were in Mexico because we thought we might come up against Mexico, and we hadn't played at altitude yet, and we hadn't eaten the diet of Mexico. So for the players to have to adapt to all those things and then play a game at altitude, 2 games within 8 days at altitude, was a massive learning curve for them. We played Brazil with that group. We played South Korea. They'd been to South Korea. They'd won in South Korea. We'd beaten Germany in Germany. Beaten Spain in Spain. So we kept racking up all these little results, but ultimately through good performances. But in order to be a better footballer or a better team or a better coach, you come up against teams, coaches, players that are as good as, if not better than you. So therefore, for us, we were forever testing ourselves. And I think in terms of the 21s, we're in a place now where we play teams. We know we're going to come up against a low block. We have to break it down. We know we're going to have to defend well while we attack because of the counter attack threat, and we know we're going to have to play well in terms of our set plays. We've got to make sure we get them right, because that's how teams want to score against us. The tier 1 teams, the Germans, the Dutch, the Spanish, the Portuguese, the teams that are the French that are on a level with us, if you like, in terms of tier 1 teams, they test us. But again, technically, we're as good as them. Tactically, I still think we've got a little way to go, but I think following the lead of Gareth and the senior team, the tactical flexibility of English players now is getting better and better and better. The one area where I think we can get better is having an understanding of momentum within games. What is it? What it means? What it means when you've got it? What it means when you lose it? And ways on the pitch and off the pitch that we can help their lads learning in terms of recognising and dealing with those things. So technically, as good as anybody, if not better. Tactically, on par, but we can get much better than we are in terms of momentum. That would be the key area, I would say, that we need to work to be the best we can be.
Great. And what kind of ways would you kind of encourage coaches to try and think about that back at the clubs with their players around kind of getting the players to understand the game more?
Well, as soon as they get back into that environment, then they're back to their clubs and they're working on their club's work. And that's where I think the relationship between the head coach and the coaches at the club and the coaches and the analysts at each club is important, and that sharing of information. As soon as we finish in November, Stuart, Lee, Carsley and me or James and me are in the car and we're off to clubs, and we're going to meet clubs, and we're going to find out about where they see the players. We'll go and have lunch with a manager, speak to the staff. So it's very much a team behind the player in terms of the coaches, the analysts, the club and the country. And that information gets shared. And sometimes we give a couple of little golden nuggets that they might not know about their players. But more often than not, we're finding out things about the players that we can then use for their benefit when they come back to us.
Yeah, and suppose it feeds further down the pathway as well, doesn't it? Younger age groups. Oh
yeah, definitely. I mean, that more so than ever, because the 15, 16s, and 17s, that YDP phase, we get to look at a lot of players, and it certainly helps us by getting involved with the clubs, getting the clubs help, the parents of players, to be able to, some of the processes we've got in place for them is great in the younger age groups, just to keep everybody informed, give them the clarity of what it is that we're trying to do, how we're trying to do it, and asking for their support. It's there's a lot of people behind that one player to help them to be as successful as they can be.
Yeah, brilliant.
Oh, great. I think if we just move on to the third and I guess the final section that we're going to unpick in a little bit more detail.
I was going to say, Laura, is it worth us going into a little bit about just before we go on to that, because it fits in quite well, like the way we look at opposition.
Yeah.
Just because I think that's probably changed quite a bit for coaches and analysts over the last few years. So yeah, but I touched on it really, really briefly about part of when we build up to a camp is looking at the opponent. But to give an example of that more specifically, we definitely do it as a technical team process now rather than just the analyst. Like I know in previous years it's been, right, analyst, you go crack on and tell me everything about the opponent. We do bring an element of that, definitely. So we sort of do a bit of background work around the coach and the strategies that coach might like to use. This is the opposition coach. We also have a little look at the squad initially and just sort of their makeup. Where do they come from? Obviously, all the same nationality, but where do they play their football and things like that? Because that might affect them. But then when it gets into the actual sort of details of it, we definitely do that as a technical team. So what we'll do is we'll tend to give out the same games to the different coaches and analysts, and we'll go away and look at them from different aspects. So we tend to look at, so one of us might look at in possession play, one of us out possession, one of us might look at key players, one of us might look at, as Aidy pointed out, momentum and how do they work with momentum and things like that. Once we've gone away and looked at them, and the coaches will actually clip some of that and things themselves, nothing like weird and wonderful, just literally a one button on sports code sort of thing to clip a few bits and bring it back to us. But then we come back together, and I think the environment that Aidy sort of alluded to before about that sort of challenge mentality that we've got, that comes into play here, because we'll come back together and it won't just be Aidy going, right, we're doing this. It'll be, so James, what did you see in possession? And I might explain something. And because all the other coaches have seen similar things, if they don't think it's relevant, they can point that out. So we're literally around a table discussing it. And I think from that point, we come up with a really good thought process around the opponent and then a robust game plan, because it's not just what I thought, or it's not just what Lee thought, and it's a mixture of what we've all thought, but then ultimately Aidy can make the final decision being really well informed on those things. That's
great. And I guess just build on that a little bit, because I think that's definitely been, a really positive shift in the way that our national teams have I guess, evolved how they utilise a staff, with the coaches taking more responsibility for some of the video work and the video preparation work that enables you, James, and Emily to be freed up to, I guess, deliver some more objective insight. I guess to Aidy, how have you found that process from a coach's perspective in terms of getting more hands-on with the analysis tools and technology?
Well, as James says, I think if we all sat in a room and watched the game together, we wouldn't get the best out of the resource we've got. So while we've got Emily beavering away doing the metrics in the background, James, we will have had a discussion, and James will be doing his work. He wants to bring things to our attention. Tim and Lee might be doing in and out possession. I like to look at the game from the game perspective, so I'll watch holistically the whole match. That's how I like to do it. And then I'll go sit down with everybody, say, right, what have you got? And then it will sort of confirm some of my things that I might have. And then we've got the metrics in the background afterwards to be able to talk through those and how they're relative to what it is that we wanted to do. But as James quite rightly points out, the challenge mentality is always there, and nobody can see everything. And it's important that we all do our own little bit and then bring it to the table afterwards.
Now, Grace, I guess just building on from that, so that that you share sort of the depth you go to in the opposition. How do you then work to sort of, I guess, decipher that information to formulate the plan for games, or the game plan, so to speak?
Well, part of that will be of how we want to play the game. So what I probably should have said right at the start is that when we came out of 2017, got to the semi-final against the Germans. When we came out of that, part of what I wanted us to be, and when I sat down and spoke to Gareth and spoke to the staff and said, we've got some really good players here, but we're not a really good team yet. So what have we got to do to be a good team? And when you come away with England, how can we make it easier for you to learn things, to pick things up, so that we can play to our maximum? Because we'll play some teams qualifiers-wise, and we're expected to win, quite rightly so, and they do present their own challenges. But in order to be the best, you've got to beat the best. And those teams that would test us more than anything, including the Germans, again, Spanish and French, they're the ones that test you. They're the ones that really test us. So in terms of, if we look at the game plan of how we want to play our game, of how we want to build up, of how we want to work through the thirds of the pitch, of how we want to finish the attack, making sure we cover all those things throughout the process of the 2 years. There will be specific times where we'll expect a team, as Jane pointed out, to drop off, but they might come and try and press us. So we've got to be able to deal with that. So it's more of the way that we give the information to the players is more of a theoretical, and get them to come up with the practical answers, either in the classroom or on the pitch or informally, as James talks about. So we will give them information, would like them to come up with the answers to the information, and there'll be different times when we do that. But then there'll be the concrete times where maybe at half time we'll say, right, this is what we need to do, and this is how we're going to do it.
Just to build on what Aidy said there, Laura, in terms of like the analysis part of the game planning, that's all put together, like in terms of meetings and stuff, that's all put together before we get on camp. So we've already picked out through those meetings we just spoke about, where we challenge each other and stuff. We'll have pulled out the key clips. We've got the meetings together. We've reviewed them again, then as a tech team, to make sure they say what we want them to say. And then, as Aidy sort of said, we've then got to be flexible, because we get on camp and suddenly we were planning on doing building out from the back session on, say, the Tuesday, but actually Gareth needed to take our 2 centre backs for training. So then there's no point in us doing a team meeting that doesn't involve the 2 of the key players in that aspect. So although the meetings are done, they're never finished until they're delivered, really. So we have to be quite flexible, and maybe that part comes out and that goes into training the next day. So the way we've looked at it is, because we have so little time with the players, every single touch point with them needs to be well thought out. So basically, we're delivering the game plan from the point they arrive on camp with the first welcome meeting, through every pre-training meeting, which happens like every time we train, through every unit meeting we have, which it tends to be the day before games, to every one-to-one chat in a corridor, to every final messages, which is just before we get on the coach to go to a game. So the game plan meeting isn't traditionally what a game plan meeting might be, of one solid block. Is actually just separated up to again, always focused on that key theme, always focused a bit on the opponent, but broken across every interaction we have with that player.
I think that final bit there, James, is pivotal for us, because if we're in a position coming into match day, and we don't need that Chichilian speech, and we don't need that fist pumping stuff, and we don't need that like heavy bouts of information, is because the more information that's given in bite-sized chunks all the way through the week, by the time we get to match day, it's like, do we need to really say any more, or should we just leave them alone to do their own thing? So to be in that position is great for us, because we know that we've done the work, we've got it into manageable chunks of information, we've covered all the bases, but we've done it in a way that's informal, that's quick in terms of time, so 15-20 minutes max. But the players are then ready, relaxed, without thinking about 101 different things in their head.
Yeah, and I suppose that clarity is the key, isn't it? So clarity to go out and perform, but also clarity to then go back and review later on. It's a lot easier
for the players and for us, absolutely.
Yeah, for both.
Both. Definitely. So as soon as we come off that pitch and the wheels start to churn, and Emily goes off to do the metrics, and James is typing away with the coaches and myself, and we're all having a look at it. We're starting the process again, but we've got a point of reference for every part of the game plan that we can go to. And then we can look at the bigger picture. So, for example, we know what it takes to win the group. I think I'm right saying it's 25 points. So we'll set targets. We'll not say, right, we need to get to this, but we'll put it up on the wall and we'll say, this is where we're at. This is our shot conversion. These are how many shots we're getting. This is the quality of the conversions percentage that we're getting. We'll get the same from the opponent. We'll talk about set plays, how many first contacts. So we'll put up these little targets that at the end of the camp, or at the start of the camp, we'll say, this is what we're after, big picture. Medium picture. And at the end, that then also gives us a frame of reference from whence we started.
So the environment you create with the staff to try and stretch, challenge, support them, it's exactly the same with the players, to try and give them that kind of ownership, to try and develop the independent kind of decision makers on the pitch. Yeah,
I mean, I think the days of banging your fist on the table are over as a head coach. These days, players want information. They're intelligent human beings, and if they know what it is that they need to do, and within those boundaries, they can express themselves. Those team boundaries, they can express themselves, and they have an understanding of their role and their responsibility within that team. Then, for us, that gives us a real opportunity to we have the same objectives in how we want to win, but we've got more important objectives of how we want to play and get players through to the first team.
In terms of that debriefing, I was going to say we tend to mix that up a little bit as well after a game. So in conjunction with our 2-year plan and what we're trying to get out of different things, the technical team will tend to review it in the same way every time. So we tend to, game finishes, obviously international football, you've got quite a quick turnaround before your next game, including a flight and everything. But as soon as we can, we'll sit down together and we'll watch the game back, as well as watching back our separate aspects of the game. And as Aidy said as well about making sure we sort of complete our own metrics coding of that as well to get some data on it, some more objective data. So we do that separately, come back together, discuss things, and then it's when the way it's delivered to the player is different depending on whatever Aidy wants to get out of the camp. So as Aidy just said, having quite a structured game plan allows us to be able to review against the game plan quite well. But that's not the only way we've done it. So we have done individual one-to-ones after the game as well, where it could range from the players getting their own clips, pulling out some of their own clips and coming to a coach to discuss it, depending on where we are on that pathway and what players we've got, if it's a development sort of time or a performance sort of time. We've also done somewhere, as you sort of just said then, Stuart, about getting the players involved, where we just asked them their thoughts on the game. So without reviewing anything, how did it feel? I remember we did one Aidy against Mexico when we were in Toulon, and it was about the players were getting really frustrated with the Mexican tactics, just the little things that they were doing to them. So instead of going into massive detail about the strategy that both teams were playing, it was more, well, what did they do that wound you up, and how can we overcome that? And it was around flip charts, and it was a good conversation. So we've done ones like that. We've done ones where we've just reviewed our bigger philosophy and principles. So were we playing with height, width, and depth? Did we have all those things? And we just set a group a little challenge of, well, let's have a look at these clips. Did you? Stuff like that. And then we've also done the ones where you're in a tournament and literally you've got 2 days between a game that you need to win. Maybe it's better that we focus on just the things that we can take forward to the next game. So we've got about 6 or 7 different ways of debriefing, but they all come off the start of us having a real interest in what actually happened first as a tech team.
I think part of that as well, James, is we talked about the pre-match, but the actual in-game stuff, which leads to all that, is really important. The way we worked hard on this in terms of our half times, we've got 15, 20 minutes maximum to be able to get information out there and to be able to take information in from the players and from what we'd seen, and how it fits with our game plan. So everybody would come in. Michael Johnson, James, Lee Carsley, Tim would all have a flip chart piece of paper with a pen on it, in possession, out possession, transitions, and our set plays. And what I found at half time was when I went down, there was an awful lot of information, everybody with the best of intention, chucking loads of information at me. It was like, and then there were my own thoughts. So we said, right, okay, I prefer peace and quiet so I can read it and take it in, because I ain't got long to do it. So I'd say to the guys, maximum of 3 things I want you to write on there from your view, your lens of that particular game. Not where you stood in the stadium, although we do cater for that and have somebody in the stand, but put down what you think's important. I would then go into the players, make sure everybody was all right, have a quick word with the doc and the medics and say, just listen to what the lads are saying, and then come and meet me in 5 minutes. I'd then go back into the changing room, into the coach's room. I'd read everything that was up there, and I'd probably pick 3 things out the 12 that were there, and I would say, yeah, that, and that. I'm going to deliver those. Can you all think about what you think is important? One other thing, and then I'd go back to the players in the changing room. The doc would come out and say, "Oh, they're talking about how they need to get tighter in the box and how they're peeling off the back of them." Okay, great. So then I'd have a frame of reference about what the mood was going into the dressing room. I'd then listen to what I might ask a question sometimes. Sometimes I might say, these are the 3 key things that are going to help us win the game and improve our performance. And then when I'd done my bit, I'd come out the way. The lads would go in and give their one key bit of information to whatever individual it was. It might be the corner taker. It might be saying, just adjust your run up, whatever that might be. Or they've left an extra man up. Make sure we deal with it in this particular way in the set plays. So in terms of a method of how we do things, we know that we're not as good as we can be, but every single thing that we do, whether it be pre, during, or post-match, we're looking to keep it fresh, want the players to want to come back, want them to go away having learned something, but overall enjoyed playing for the country.
I think that's the key, isn't it? It's that flexible approach to meet the needs of the players at each individual moment in time, and you guys in the reviewing that you're doing helps you identify, specifically what's the best way. So whatever that bit of information is that you think you need to discuss or share, it's looking at that individual moment in time in the context of the game, the camp, the 2-year plan, and recognizing the best way to work with the players at this moment is in way A or way B, and having that flexibility within that. Yeah. I guess just jumping one back slightly to match day. So obviously the rules changed 18 months, nearly 2 years ago now, in terms of the ability where you're able to send information down to the bench during the game. I guess, James, how's that evolved your role, firstly, and then I guess to Aidy afterwards, how do you find receiving information in the moment as opposed to having to wait to half-time or full-time? I guess James first.
Okay. I think the rule change has been really good for us as analysts. Across the different age groups, we now try and get information to the bench across all age groups. That might be through having a MacBook on the bench or an iPad on the bench and being able to send it to one of the coaches. We're quite lucky with the 21s in that we can mirror what the seniors do, where we have the actual analyst on the bench as well, which meant I need to brush up on my singing skills of the national anthem because I'm actually down there for that. But being down there on the bench then and being able to receive the footage from Emily gives us a wide angle shot, obviously within earshot of Aidy, to be able to talk to him, which I think is really important because it is a different lens. It is a different way of looking at the game compared to being at pitch level. So I think the ways that it's helped us most has probably been the way we actually work is Lee Carsley will sit in the stand and be on a radio to me down on the bench. So he might be asking me questions to check with Tim, who sat next to me, the goalkeeping coach, and also to check with Aidy. But also I can ask him things back the other way. And it gives us a really good sort of feedback loop of, say, are they playing the formation we thought they were going to play? What are these key things that keep happening, and can you review that? So Lee might see it and then want me to review it, so I'll be able to watch it on the bench, check before delivering anything over to Aidy. I think before Aidy talks on it, the key part for me is making sure I don't bombard him. Yeah. Because sometimes, like, Tim might ask me something, Lee might talk to me about something. If I just try and shout all that onto Aidy in the middle of him trying to concentrate, that's not the best way to go about it. So I'm kind of like that filter and check-in process before I give it to Aidy. But yeah, Aidy, how do you find it?
Well, I think it's really helpful to me. It's really useful. But you're right. I don't want loads of information. I want key bits of information that I think are going to make the difference. So if it needs to be said, it comes down and and we discuss it. Also, it works the other way as well. So maybe times within games where I'll see something and I'll say to Tim or go and talk directly to James. Just ask Lee Carsley to have a look at this particular player or that particular partnership. Or are they doing something different at corners? Because I've just seen that they're free. So that's almost my confirmation from what's behind me, from a different view, and also from a view from James and from Tim that are also on the bench that can give that information. There's also like substitutions that we can talk about as we get into the game, the latter parts of the game. So as long as it's bite-sized, I think that's the way to do it. Otherwise, you can get bombarded with it. But as a process that we've got now, and again, we didn't get it right at first, but where we are now, we're getting a lot more use and a lot more information that allows me to make hopefully a better decision.
I guess it sort of brings us back nicely full circle, doesn't it? And it stresses right back at where we started about the importance of the relationship between you two, how well you know each other. James, knowing what is the right information to give to Aidy in the heat of the moment in a game that, it might be a friendly, but it might be, the difference between qualifying for a European Championships or not. And yeah, the essence of knowing each other really well, knowing each other, what helps each other is pretty key to the success, whether that's in the planning process, the reviewing process, or right in the heat of the moment in the game.
Yeah, I think it's massively important. I think I was just going to say the bit on the bench, the biggest difference I've noticed is when you sat in the stand as an analyst, it's very cold and you're away from the action. Even when you're surrounded by 30, 40,000 fans, you're still away from it. Whereas when you're on the bench, you're right involved in it almost emotionally. So that was almost like learning a new skill to try and still take myself to that place, like being in the stand and like not be affected by anything that's going on. I almost wanted to put headphones on and listen to some music because you've got everything going on and all you want to do is concentrate on actually the game and what you're seeing and be able to give Aidy that information. If I was caught up in it and sort of celebrating a chance and all that kind of stuff, I can't deliver what I need to deliver. So, for example, some of our best moments to be able to review things are like when there's an injury or if the ball goes out of play or if there's a yellow card or if there's a sending off. It gives me a 2-minute window to discuss with Lee, discuss with Tim, and almost come up to like a little technical team meeting to be able to give Aidy some key information. So you definitely, it's a different skill set to learn, but I think it's one that as analysis goes forward and potentially they become more like that. You got on and off pitch coaching, and you've got to be that cold head to be able to think about those things. I think it's definitely where it's going probably.
Now, great. I guess final question from me is that final review process. So, camp's over, the games are over. What does that review process look like? And I guess to complete the circle back to where we start, how does that feed back into the 2-year plan?
Well, first of all, the MDT get together. We see the boys off. They get in the cars. They go back to the clubs. Then the MDT get together, and then we'll have our debrief. We've tried it a couple of different ways. One being which is what we do now, is where we've done it almost like a hot debrief, if you like. So people are still fresh. You've still got their thoughts from every perspective. And then we'll meet as an MDT when we get back, probably a couple of weeks later. But in between that, we have a technical, our technical meetings. So our technical meetings are every Monday. They remain the same. We get together, we discuss. So we might have a hot MDT debrief with everybody in it, and then we'll have our coaches debrief, and then we'll have our MDT just to make sure that we've got all the information that we needed. This is everybody that's involved in the MDT. They come for that meeting. And so half of that meeting will be the debrief, and the next half of that debrief will be where, what's next, sort of what's important now, moving forward, our 80-20 principle, what's the top 20% that we need to keep working on? Is it the same or does it need to shift? In terms of the information then that we've got from the game on the players, I will be fortunate enough to share an office with Gareth Southgate and Steve Holland. So I'll be in there. They'll be asking me questions about the players. Most of them they know already anyway. We'll have football conversations about each other's camps. But I'll be able to say, when Gareth says to me, who is your best player, or who's your best 3 players, or how did so-and-so do, then that information is there. So the loop is complete as far as the first team's concerned. I've learned about what they've been through. They've learned about what we've done. And generally, I mean, I don't know whether you're aware, you probably are, any European Championships, he's there. If they've not got a game, he's watching the under-21s, which is the same, I guess, as a manager in a club coming down to watch the academy players just to see what's coming through. So that is the system upwards. In terms of the development and the bridge, I'll do the same thing with Keith Downing or Paul Simpson. Gather the information, feed it back in to our group of coaches, and then we ask the question, what's important now for us? What do we do? We might have a game in March or wherever it is, and we prepare for those games accordingly, and the system and the loop start again.
Brilliant, guys. Thanks so much for the insight you provided over. I think we've just gone over an hour, just over the last hour. So I personally really enjoyed it. I'm sure the people that will end up listening in and watching it will take so much from it. So thank you so much for your time, not just your time though, but your openness and your honesty about the information that that you've shared. We really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, cheers. Thank you.